All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 3 of chapter 7 of our course Reality Atlas. And we are really kind of, full steam ahead into the deep dive down the rabbit hole of where sacred geometry has brought Scott and I. And today we're going to speak about cells and atoms, and we're going to close the chapter with a nice discussion about Fibonacci and how that relates to atoms. But I suppose, Scott, let's just dive right in.
Yeah, so I'm excited to delve into the microcosm here, the microcosm of our cells. And in the book, I recommend watching a certain YouTube video.
I watched it actually. Yeah, Drew Barry's.
Drew Barry's 2011 TED Talk, where he illustrated 3D animations of cellular machinery. It's really fantastic.
Incredible video.
Since that time, there have been a lot of animations coming out of MIT that show the cellular machinery, and they're really incredible. I mean, it's so geometric and so detailed, what's going on inside those cells. And so basically inside of a cell, you have a huge number of proteins. So in a typical mammalian cell, you have 10 to the 10th power proteins. So that's 1 with 10 zeros behind it. And so what's a protein? A protein is a three-dimensional form that's made up of amino acid monomers. So amino acids, there's like 20 of them that are used in a mammalian cell, and they're arranged in a linear sequence. And then you can imagine this long chain that goes on. And what happens is it takes this long chain and it folds up into and kind of wraps around itself in a big knot. And then you end up with this very specific three-dimensional form that we call a protein. Okay, but the early on, there was this guy Leventhal who in 1969 came up with this idea that the way that proteins fold is actually a paradox, because there's so many different ways that those long chains of amino acids can fold. He calculated that there's 10 to the 300th power different ways that a typical amino acid chain could fold up into a protein. And that is such a big number. You know, there's only 10 to the 81st power atoms in the entire visible universe. And so this is so far and away above that. It's got, more than 100 extra zeros after it. Of the ways that this could possibly fold up. And so what's amazing is that the protein does fold up perfectly. Now, if we were testing that randomly, and we had one test every millionth of a second, so you're just testing a million times in a second, there still wouldn't be enough time in the age of the universe to get around to testing all of those possibilities for just one protein.
Yeah, just one protein.
Yeah. And so the way that proteins fold is complex, and we know that there's 4 different levels at least. There's the hydrogen and ionic bonds, van der Waals forces, and even the surrounding water molecules in the cell exert hydrophobic forces on the amino acid chain that cause it to fold in certain ways. And so there's this tremendous complexity in the cell that we don't understand how it is that proteins fold up so perfectly in a millionth of a second, like defying all mathematical odds. It just happens.
It's I love this one on cells. So just to bring us back to what we're doing with this chapter, Scott, is like we're articulating one of the great jewels of sacred geometry and the study of this art, is that it begins to bring you into contact with the most exquisite patterns of order that exist in reality, basically. And what you're doing here is bringing us on a deep dive into biology at the cellular level and just explaining to us just the beautiful kind of like precision and exactitude that has to happen for amino acids to fold up in just the right way so that they can become a protein that's of any use to a human, like become a protein that can be used in a muscle or being used in a bit of brain or something. Am I right in that?
Well,
it's like,
yeah, so I just described all of that to describe the way that one protein folds up. Remember, but there's 10 to the 10th power of proteins in a single cell. So it's just teeming with proteins. There's so many proteins in there. In fact, when you think about it, one of the most complicated things that humans have ever built, let's say an Airbus A350, it has about 2.5 million parts. So let's say 10 to the 6th parts. Well, there's 10 to the 10th proteins in the cell, in one cell.
Yeah.
And so just to put it in perspective, that there's 10,000 times more parts in one protein than there are in an airplane.
It's worth pausing here to just take a moment to actually try to gather the vastness of the complexity, or the vastness of the scale of what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah, so the cell is this incredible I mean we should really be in awe of the fact that it can even one cell can exist because of the complexity there. And keep in mind that an Airbus A350 can't reproduce itself, you know, whereas that's built into every cell.
Yeah,
I mean, that's insane.
So can I have a fun go here at mirroring back some of the stuff you're saying here, right? Just to sort of give the listeners a go at following with me, right? So first of all, the fact that proteins fold up at all is pretty cool. The fact they fold up into something useful for life is even better, right? And you've explained it well, that essentially you have this kind of like 20 amino acids that can fold up in so many millions of millions of ways that it's more than there's actually atoms in the visible universe. The options for folding.
And let me just say,
right in that?
It's sort of like language. You know how we have 26 letters in the English alphabet.
Yeah.
And just those 26 letters can be combined in various ways to make 100,000 words. But this is so far much of a vaster combinatorial space where you have 20 proteins and you can make 20 amino acids and you can make 10 to the 10th different proteins in the cell. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just unbelievably vast. And so I just want to kind of go to this because I'm hanging on the skinny branches here, actually, and I just want to sort of bear with myself, if that's okay. And I'm hoping this is helpful for bringing people that are trying to grasp the complexity we're talking about, So like the huge amount of possibilities that a protein has for folding is like, it's hard to actually fathom the amount of options that a protein has in terms of folding, correct? You could just leave it at that. Yeah.
Right.
And yet proteins seem to fold on cue perfectly every time into exactly the type of protein they need to become. Is that correct?
Yes.
So there's kind of a beauty and an exactness and a perfection almost in that happening, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, let me keep going because I'm no biologist, right? But I just, so that's cool enough. Proteins do cool things in my head, right? Now, we're just going to bring that to a cell. So in one cell, there's a lot of proteins, if I'm understanding you correctly. Is that right? So just, would you mind giving me that number again? Like, so in each individual cell, how many proteins are there?
It's about 10 billion.
About 10 billion. So that's 10 to what power?
10 to the 10th.
10 to the 10th. Okay. So so in each individual cell, there's 10 billion of these magically folding things. Yeah. Okay, so next question, Mr. Scott Onstott. How many cells are there in the human body? Do we know? I mean, I don't want to sort of like blindside you now. I mean, that's a pretty tricky question.
I think it's 10 to the 12th. Yeah.
10 to the 12th, is it?
And you know what that is?
No, what is that?
Well, given the number of proteins in one cell and the number of cells in the body, the number of proteins in the body is on par with the number of stars in the universe.
Wow. Like, that's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're going to get on to the next step is like proteins are ultimately made of atoms. Isn't that right? We're going down another level. I don't want to go there yet because I want to stay on cells, but
yeah, sure.
isn't that where this goes? Like, as in, there can be no
Yeah,
amino acids
we're gonna
without.
zoom in there more, but amino
Yeah.
acids, you know, they're made of everything is made of atoms in the visible world, and so we're gonna get there. But there's more to say a little bit more about the cells.
You bet. Yeah, let's stay with cells because
So
this particular part of this chapter, you know, like really speaks to me in terms of, like I always sort of say, when you look deeply enough into reality, you begin to get struck by awe and reverence, or kind of a reverie of like, wow, like what? It is so complex and beautiful and perfect that your mind boggles at a certain point, doesn't it? It's just like, wow.
well, do you remember the graphic that we had? I think it was in our last talk, with the proportioner showing the human body's scale is at the golden ratio with respect
Yeah.
to the vast spectrum of everything in the visible mind, from the proton up to the visible universe. We're right at the golden ratio. So we're at this hinge point, in a way, between the macrocosm and the microcosm in scale. But we're also kind of at a hinge point of complexity, because we look out in the macrocosm and we see all of the stars. And then we look into our bodies and we find that we have as many proteins in our bodies as there are stars in the universe. And so
wow,
we get to inhabit this Goldilocks zone in terms of scale and complexity. We get to be kind of right in the sweet spot there, where we can look above with a telescope and we can look below with a microscope. And we should just kind of be amazed, whichever route we plan to go on. And this is all exploring the visible world, folks. This is just one part of the total framework. And that's where I think when you look deeply enough into the visible world, you find beauty and you find truth and you find goodness there. And I want to read something here from the chapter on cells that says, from the book, I suggest that visible cells interact with corresponding invisible minds, folding proteins as needed, for example. There is nothing qualitatively different to the relationship our brains have with our minds. Only the scales are different. The principle of recursive dissociation works within minds at all scales. So I'm suggesting that the cell, which is a physical, in the visible world, in the visible mind, it's interacting, it must be interacting with its own mind in the invisible domain. And that mind is influencing what's happening in the folding of proteins, for example. So that consciousness is guiding the visible world at every step. Just like your consciousness is guiding the physical atoms of your body around, as your mind, your soul, your invisible side is piloting the avatar of your physical body around the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I get that.
So I think that the cell has a mind that's piloting it around and coordinating all of its activities at its scale. And it's interesting, like it's kind of like you have to, if you grew up in San Francisco, you kind of have to leave San Francisco to understand San Francisco, because you have to have a different perspective on a different city before you can start to appreciate where you came from, right?
Yes.
So the same is true here, where we have to, it's helpful to look at the reality of a cell and then come back home to the human body and say, oh my God, we are, this is an as above, so below type of a situation, you know?
I hear you.
Yeah, and our situation is no different than that of the plight of a single cell, you know? But we're just it's amazing that those are within our bodies, you know? And all life is made out of these building blocks, you know?
It's absolutely amazing. to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah, all of life is made out of these building blocks. It's just incredible. Just talking there, Scott, about like, there's kind of like an invisible hand, but you speak about a consciousness interacting with the physical protein folding, for example. It reminds me a little bit of like when I remember reading Rupert Sheldrake, and he kind of like speaks a lot about nature has kind of like accumulated this kind of long history of habits, and so when you have like, I mean, I presume you get a protein that folds into a type of cell that becomes part of a fly, for example. And he used a sort of an example like, how does that particular cell know whether it's going to become part of an antenna or part of a foot or part of a leg on the fly?
This is an important question that comes up, and it's related loosely to DNA, right? Because DNA, we know that an organism inherits its DNA, and that determines a lot. It must determine a lot. And I think when they discovered DNA, like in the mid 20th century, they assumed that it controlled everything about the organism. But since that time, we've found that some problems in a way, because like there's a tiny microscopic freshwater crustacean called Daphnia pulex, and it has far more genes than humans do. So what's up with that? How come it has so much more genetic information than we do? And the largest genome that we've ever discovered is in an amoeba, a single-celled organism. It has 200 times more base pairs than we do. And that's called the C-value paradox.
Wow.
Because if DNA was kind of responsible for complexity, then these are counterexamples to that. Because we're talking about a single-celled organism has 200 times more of it than we do. And yet we seem pretty complicated in comparison with it.
It's almost like a contradiction. I mean, my expectation would be, I mean, it's a bit human-centric, but it's like, we're so great. Surely we have more genetic code. We've got more genes. We've got more than a single-celled amoeba, would be my guess. So this sort of like, it throws up an anomaly, I guess, does it, this type of thing?
Yeah, it's sort of a counterexample to the theory. And then if you think about it, every cell in your body has the same DNA, right? That's the DNA that you would pass on to your offspring, and every organism has in every cell the exact same copy of DNA. So then the question is, what makes the cell in your retina different than the cell in your big toe? What determines that cell will become a retina cell or a big toe skin cell? And obviously it has something to do with DNA, but if the DNA is the same, what scientists have proposed, let's say in the last 30 years, is epigenetic phenomena, that is beyond genetics, that is signaling between cells, things that happen in the developmental process that they assume must control the fate of a particular cell in how it develops and knows how to be what it is. But when you think about the complexity of it, it's staggering, because in the course of your lifetime, you're going to have 10 to the 15th cell divisions. Okay. And you could have literally neighboring cells that perform completely different functions, that have completely different structures. And yet they have the exact same DNA, and they have to maintain that for 10 to the 15th divisions. And if you're saying that it's just epigenetics, that it's somehow related to the signaling between cells or the developmental processes, I think that's a very weak theory for explaining the vast differences that cells take during the lifetime. And so I see that is almost less probable than 32 dimensionless constants controlling the fine-tuning of the universe itself. Because it seems to me that there's so much complexity in that cell that has to be it has to know, quote, know that it is different than the neighboring cell.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in materialism, cells can't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that if there is a connection with a mind, a cellular mind, then that mind would know.
Yeah.
That mind knows, and that mind can mediate, and that mind can step in and maintain the identity of the big toe cell over 10 to the
Mm-hmm.
15th cell divisions. It can maintain the identity of your retina cell,
Mm-hmm.
and you can live out your life. But I think that
Mm-hmm.
if we're relying on blind chance and in the theory of materialism, it starts to seem absurd that each cell would be so improbable. It's almost like you might need a multiverse to explain each cell in the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like you have like an infinite number of possible cells, and just the perfect one is the one that's in your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, like that theory, just to me,
Doesn't add up.
it seems to collapse under its own utter improbability.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Like, even just taking time to reflect and pontificate on the scale and the complexity alone does something to you, I find. It leaves you sort of, well, it's certainly like, for me, it feels humbling in a way to go, wow, like, I mean, it just how incredibly awesome the makeup of our own physical bodies are is beautiful to think about. You know, I feel changed when I reflect upon it.
Yeah, me too. And I think that
Mm,
I have a tendency to get lost in the complexities of the research
mm-hmm,
and so on. But at the end of the day, I'll collect all these gems that I found
mm,
and try to present it to you, the dear listener or
yeah.
viewer, so that you can sit back and appreciate like what you're saying, Geoff, and just kind of marvel at the complexity, at the improbability of the theory that it's all random, and
Mm-hmm,
ponder the possibility that that minds, invisible minds, might be guiding all
mm-hmm,
of this in the visible world, just as your
yeah.
invisible mind is influencing the decisions made in your physical brain that
Yeah.
propagate and can be weighed and measured in the visible.
Yeah. It's like it's such a worthwhile endeavor for that reason. Like it seems to I mean, I suppose I can only speak of my own experience, but I guess that it's similar for most people. Like when you deeply reflect upon this beauty and this incredible, intelligence, it seems like to me, in terms of how reality is made up, a couple of things happen. Like you just get triggered by awe, you marvel at it. It's not like a big, huge, like it's no big profound epiphany or anything. It's just a kind of a wow, like how awesome is that? But over time, the more you kind of meditate on these things and the more patterns you sort of open up to and the more beauty you see in reality, you get this kind of like real arising of like gorgeous qualities of the human experience, things like awe, things like reverie, that very quickly transforms into like gratitude, kind of a gratefulness, a kind of a happiness to be here, to witness what a gorgeous point in the whole cosmic scale we get the privilege of existing in. All those things kind of happen, and they're the changes, if you like, when we talk about this stuff can transform you. That's really what we're pointing towards, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that when you get into that energy of gratitude, it's what's happening there is you're coming into harmony with the
Mm,
whole as above, so below, and you're just appreciating your role in that
mm,
in that vastness. And you
yeah.
can look above, you can look below, you can look within. And
Mm-hmm.
if you come to appreciate that and accept it, that makes all the difference,
Yeah, you're
because
changed by it.
you're changed by what's happening is you're allowing higher forces or higher
Mm-hmm.
intelligences to,
Mm-hmm.
you're inviting them into your domain, into
experience.
your
Yeah.
little narrow boundary.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that has so much more potential than
Mhm.
you do just within your own boundary alone.
Yeah, and while we're rolling this one, you're exactly right, Scott. It's like as you begin to sort of invite these, higher forces into your finite consciousness or whatever, there's a felt sense of there's not actually that big of a difference between little me and what makes up small Geoff and the rest of reality, that the boundary becomes more permeable and you realize, hey, you know what, I'm just made up of all the same stuff that tree is, or the building is, or the stars are. It's a nice feeling. It's like, that's the thing, it's not just kind of like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, but actually it's a nice feeling. There's almost like a reassurance in there, something of like, whoa, like,
I think
wow, it's
like you have to kind of lead cognitively to apprehend what I'm talking about and to assimilate that. But then hopefully it kind of sinks down into your heart where you feel
yeah,
it. And then that's what can transform you, that emotion.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
so much the data, because we're kind of awash in data and it doesn't matter. But if you allow that data in and allow it to
Yeah,
sink in, then that's when it can transform you.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
what you were just saying, that you're made up of this stuff, what you're made up of in the visible world that we can weigh and measure are atoms.
yeah,
And atoms all come from stellar fusion. So
yeah.
with the exception of hydrogen, which is the simplest of all possible atoms because it just has one proton and one electron, all other atoms have multiple protons and neutrons and more electrons. And how does that happen? That happens in the furnace of stars. When
Yeah,
stars live out their life cycle and then they go supernova and explode out into the cosmos, they eject all of those larger atoms that they've fused together. So,
yeah,
you know, helium, lithium, and it gets heavier and heavier. And you need a truly massive star to make iron. Iron is a very heavy element, but every cell of your blood has iron at its core. And
yeah,
so every cell of your blood came from a supermassive supernova that exploded in the distant past. Like
yeah.
that star must have existed for billions of years, and then it exploded, and then just a tiny bit of that iron found its way into our system and finally
I
into the
know.
biology. It's amazing.
You see, that's the type of thinking that does exactly the same thing. It's like Carl Sagan's idea, isn't it? That we're made of star stuff. It's kind of
Yeah.
a nice idea. It looks good on a t-shirt. But when you actually reflect upon it, you go like, hang on, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
really, like the iron in my blood has come from a distant star that exploded how many billion years ago?
Yeah.
That's just, and that's a fact, isn't it? That's like,
There's no way
that's not
around
even
it.
hippie woo-woo
Yeah.
stuff. It's just like scientifically, that's the deal. Everybody, even
Yeah.
Carl Sagan, he wasn't particularly spiritual. He totally subscribed to that.
Yeah.
It is the way it is. It's
And
the mind boggler.
in the 20th century, we did so much wonderful research on the atom, on the quantum physics, and we discovered the hydrogen wave function. We discovered the geometry of the electron orbitals. And in the book, I have a graphic that shows the different geometries associated with the different energy states of
Yeah,
the simplest atom.
you might show the image, but I'll just put this up for now on the
Yeah.
screen.
And
Is that
so,
the image you're talking about?
yeah, so those are all the different
Yeah.
possibilities that the orbital can take, depending on three integer numbers that can change.
Yeah. What are
So
those integer numbers actually again?
um, I think one might be angular momentum, another one spin. I don't remember offhand, but there are
Okay,
things like that. But
I get you.
there are variables that get plugged into the hydrogen wave function, which is given on that page, basically.
Okay, I
And
get
you
you.
vary those numbers and you get a different geometry. And
Yeah.
so this reminds me of cymatics, the study of the connection between sound and form.
It's exactly like that. Yeah.
And so
Yeah, me too.
but here we have a connection between math and form.
Yeah, yeah.
So you vary
It's
the math,
incredible.
and the math, they're just not integer numbers. You just change them and bang, you get a different shape.
Yeah.
And
And I'm looking here at like there's ones, twos, fours,
yeah.
sixes, eights. It's incredible.
And so um, when you think about that, all of the things that the visible world is made up of are these little sacred geometries, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the tiniest level. So like just to trip ourselves out fully, right? We were having great fun there with the proteins and how many proteins are in a cell, right? Which you
That's
said
it.
was like as many
10,
stars in the.
no, there's 10 to the 10th proteins in one cell. There's 10 to the 12th
Okay.
cells in the body. And so
Uh-huh.
all of the proteins in the body, if you add up all of the proteins in all of your cells, is on par with the number of stars in the universe.
That's magic. Now, here's the $64,000 question. How many atoms then are in a protein? I'm sure there's a myriad of different types of proteins that have
Yeah, I
very
don't
different
know.
makeups, but
I don't know
okay.
that answer. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be more than 10 to the 10th. It's going to be add a bunch of zeros onto that.
We just keep going down these levels, these scales, but we meet geometry all the way, don't we? Like we meet it at the cellular level. We meet it really beautiful, this hydrogen waveform function. Like I just love geometry when you can look at it and you just go, yeah, cool. You know, there's a pure symmetry there that
Yeah.
just I instantly resonate with, you know, and
And
I
you've
go, oh
got
my God.
you've got to take a moment and look up that Drew Barry TED Talk and other things like that, because when you are able to see the machinery of the cell in action, it's amazing. There's like little motors, there's like keys fitting in locks, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of incredible geometries going on, and just the way
it's
that
kind of miraculous, really, when you
I
get into that level
oh,
of,
it's magnificent. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm just appreciating the beauty of, like, the aesthetic beauty of those forms. Um,
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
And by the way, I love the way you're saying that, like all of this we're talking about and blowing our minds, you know, and this is the kind of the fine-tuning side of it. And you make a lovely point here that all of this matter and energy, I think, are only 5% of the total universe. Is that, you know, so even this radical complexity and an awesome design that we're witnessing here, it's just even like a 5% of everything. Is
well,
that is
what
that right?
that comes from is dark matter and dark energy being
Mm-hmm.
invented to kind of account for the discrepancy that our theory of gravity has with observation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at how galaxies, the stars in galaxies stick together, and yet how the galaxies move apart from one another,
Yeah.
we have to come up with dark matter to hold the galaxies together and dark energy to push everything apart. And so those kind of fudges add up to 95% of the total mass energy in the universe. But what that tells me is that we sort of don't have our theory of gravity right.
Mm.
And that's something that I know physicists are working on. But it's also kind of a funny thing, like, well, physics is the study of 5%
Yeah,
of total. And
I know.
we don't understand 95% of it, so sorry about
Well,
that.
and even the 5%, they only understand a fraction of it too. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of self-confessed. I mean, I think there's a lot of humble physicists out there, and I think the better the physicist, the more humble they appear. You know, they kind of,
Well,
you
it's
know, the
funny, in
more
the
they
history of
discover.
science that we get to these moments where the physicists seem to think they know it all. They were at that point
Yeah,
right before quantum physics happened in the early
yeah,
20th, and they were kind of announcing that they had figured it all out, and there was nothing
yeah,
left to see. And then
yeah,
they discovered that physics is inextricably interconnected with consciousness. And I think that
yeah.
100 years later, we still, as a culture, haven't come to understand the implications of that discovery.
Yeah.
We still are under the kind of the Newtonian idea in popular culture that everything is material and separate from consciousness. And yet for 100 years, we've known that's not true. But it's hard to explain to the average guy on the street, and even the smartest people will say, if you thought you understood quantum physics, you weren't paying attention, because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, totally.
But that,
I like that quote, actually.
Yeah, it's coming from the having the underlying assumptions in the dominant paradigm. From that perspective, it doesn't make any sense. But from the perspective that all is consciousness, it makes total sense.
Yeah, total sense. Yeah.
So that's another issue. But
so where are we going next, Scott?
We could dive into quarks.
Yeah.
So what are
I'm
quarks?
just enjoying this dive. So we've gone from cells, we've gone from atoms. Then there was like, everybody thought it stopped at the atom for hundreds of years, didn't they? Then they split the atom, and then there's just a whole load of spooky stuff, to borrow Einstein's term, that happens down at that level. It's just like all bets are off, kind of, and
well, yeah. So they discovered these when they made atom smashers. Okay, they had to blow it apart. And then they just see a trail of a quark in the bubble chamber. They see this kind of hint of something. And then they've classified them as, there's 6 flavors of quarks. There's, I forget, there's up, down, top, bottom, strange, and charm.
Yes, yeah. I'm
that's
looking at it here.
The names they've given to them. But what's weird is that all the flavors of quarks are always changing into one another, like super fast. Like a top becomes a bottom, a charm becomes a strange, a down becomes an up. And so it's this massive kind of like craziness going on in there. But for some reason, there will always be exactly 3 up and down quarks, which carry a charge. And the other 4 flavors can only be detected in an atom smasher. But those up and down quarks are the things that carry the charge and determine whether it's a proton or a neutron. And so an up quark has a charge of plus 2/3, and a down quark has a charge of minus 1/3. And I find that if you express that in decimal, like plus 0.66666 ... or minus 0.333333 ... and then you combine them together to get a net +1 charge. +1 is actually 0.999 ...
Yeah.
So you have repetitive 3s, 6s.
Yeah. Your favorite thing.
And this is where it reminds me of Tesla's quote, where he said, if you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe. And so what I think Tesla was referring to is the charge of the atom, because Tesla was so much into electricity. He's the one that invented alternating current. And that is, in a way, the secret of the universe. And I get kind of deeper into the science of number in this chapter, and I'm not going to belabor all of that, but I welcome you to read it. But basically, it shows a deep symmetry between the 3, 6, and 9 and the Fibonacci sequence. And I show that resonance that happens because when you take the digital roots of the Fibonacci sequence, at its modulo 9 arithmetic, it repeats with a period of 24. And if you array those 24 digits around a circle, all of these amazing patterns emerge, such that all of the numbers that are opposite each other add to 9. And 3, 6, and 9 form 2 equilateral triangles above and a flipped one below. So it's sort of like the pyramid and the pyramid inverse.
This guy.
And so to me, that there's a deep resonance between the Fibonacci sequence and the way that atoms and quarks carry charge.
Mm.
And I speculate that the fundamental reason that we have charge is based on the qualities of number. And I show how the Fibonacci sequence is not just a singular sequence in mathematics. It can actually be formed by any two numbers added together to form a sequence. It doesn't have to be, traditionally, the Fibonacci sequence, it starts with 0 and 1.
Yeah.
But you can actually start with like 13 and -7, which I show in the book. And how
they always will end up pointing towards Fibonacci.
They always point towards the golden ratio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The golden ratio. Yeah.
So these are all the Fibonacci-like sequences converge on the golden ratio very quickly. And so the golden ratio appears to be something that's in the invisible. It's actually in the intelligible domain. It's the limit towards which all physical reality reaches, but can never attain.
Incredible.
Like
can I just jump in there on that? So because I understand, the Fibonacci sequence and how that leads to the golden ratio. You've got 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. So that's a well-known sequence. Are you saying that I could pick any number at random, like any number at all? Like I could pick 65 and -7, and then I run the ratio between those two numbers over and over again?
In the book, I just randomly chose 13 and -7. And I have a spreadsheet shown there that shows how they make a sequence, and then you take the ratios of successive terms, and they get progressively closer to the golden ratio, and you can get the golden ratio to let's see, I don't know, 6 or 8 digits.
Yeah, you have it at the 25th iteration or 26th or
25th iteration. It doesn't take very many terms in the sequence.
Yeah, you're at the golden ratio
to get there real fast.
Wow. So it comes true. Yeah.
And so the way I think of it is the Fibonacci sequence is the kind of discrete representation of the golden ratio in the visible world, because it's made of integers. And so when you have, let's say, a sunflower, all of its seeds will form a Fibonacci pattern. If you count them in a consistent manner, you'll have Fibonacci numbers going clockwise and counterclockwise.
Yes.
And it can only do this based on whole seeds, because you never have like a partial seed. You have it's a seed or not a seed. And so it's where things are quantized as integers in the real world. You have a cell or you don't have a cell.
Yes.
And so, but all of that is governed by the mathematics of the golden ratio.
Wow.
But it's made concrete by being part of a Fibonacci-like sequence.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, I guess to simplify that even further, the Fibonacci sequence is like the real, and the golden ratio is the ideal.
Gotcha. Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah. Beautiful.
And so later in the chapter, I talk about deep symmetries between Pascal's triangle, which is a kind of mathematical curiosity that the mathematician Pascal came up with in the, I guess, in the 18th century, and the ways that electron orbital shells fill. They have the same kind of pyramids that have a certain diagonal rule, and they're very reminiscent of one another, such that I see that the ways that electrons fill up at atomic shells is entirely mathematical.
Wow.
And this is just kind of emphasizing the fact that all of those sacred geometries that we saw of the atoms, they're all coming from math. In fact, they are math. There's nothing more to them than math. And this is what Max Tegmark, the physicist, was pointing out, that the universe is literally made of math. If we know that the small stuff in the visible universe is literally math, then all of the large stuff is too.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And We'll keep going, because I was going to, you end with an interesting point, and I would like to get some clarification, because you said, yes, the universe is mathematical, but math and Latin, you use Latin as a language, are relationships invented by and understood only by consciousness.
Yeah.
Can I ask what you mean by that? Because I can go with everything is math. I totally see the atoms. I can see the beautiful geometries at the smallest level. And if all of the smallest things that make up the big things are all pure geometry, then everything is geometry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I could kind of like full stop the chapter there, and I'd feel very happy.
Well,
but
I think,
just felt a little bit speed bumped by that last line. I mean, not speed bumped. I mean, it's like you might be able to help me frame that in terms of what your intention is by that statement.
So we know mathematics is a language, right?
Yeah.
It's the language that the universe was built out of.
Mm-hmm.
And so if mathematics kind of freaks you out because you're not sure, you don't understand it,
mm-hmm.
You could say it's a language like Latin. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a language. And saying that the universe is made out of Latin
doesn't really make sense.
It's kind of true. It's made out of math.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do it for me, because I know that languages are artifacts of consciousness. Languages don't just exist on their own. They had to be invented by consciousness, right? So with I don't know Latin, but I know English. And so when I was a child and my mother held up an apple and she said, "This is an apple, have a bite."
Yeah.
I associated the fruit, the conscious experience of that eating that fruit with that sound apple, right? So the language exists as a form of analogy. I have the experience, and I have an analogy of this sound with a monkey mouth, apple. And I make that a conscious association.
Yeah.
Okay. So math or any language is like that. You have an idea and you express it down as pi. You have this idea of the circle's diameter and its circumference, and you're going to express that as the symbol, the Greek letter pi. And that kind of, for you, is a symbol of that analogy. But it can only ever exist in a mind. So the idea of pi only ever exists in a mind. So like the philosopher
awareness.
George Berkeley said, numbers, I don't know the exact quote, but it was like, numbers come from a mind. Like, numbers don't exist by themselves. You have to have a mind to know numbers.
Yeah.
You don't find the number 3 outside.
Yeah.
It's in a mind. And so math is in a mind, isn't it? It's not out there.
You reminded me a bit of Rupert Spira, and I am getting myself into a twist, but this is the fun of this chapter, like, I'll tell you where I'm getting a little bit like, I'm stumbling a little bit, is that I totally accept what you're saying about Latin as a language, or French or English, and it's just a representation of experience, and it has a useful purpose for that reason. To say that the universe is made up of French or English wouldn't make any sense to me, right? It doesn't like, well, what are you talking about? It's just sort of a communication mechanism that we've invented, right? We've invented French, we've invented English. I get that, right? But then I was thinking, does mathematics potentially have a separate special placeholder in the dance of reality that makes it different to English and Latin and French? And what I'm getting at there is, like, I love the psychologist Carl Jung, and he sort of made the point that, like, mathematical principles at their deepest level, they carry archetypal truth inherently. And it was like, earlier on in the book, you also mentioned this word, I think it's like a priori, like pre-existing truths, And so to say then something like the archetype of threeness then, right? does kind of exist before we come up with, oh, I'm going to say that's a triangle, or I'm going to say that's a, that it actually is it's a fundamental truth of reality that comes before humans.
But still, it's
conscious.
in a mind. It's just in the universal mind instead of your human mind. It's also in your human mind, but it comes from, it was invented by universal mind. Prior to the formation of the entire visible dissociation. So prior to the Big Bang.
It's
in my view, I think numbers were invented prior to the existence of the universe. Get you. That's where you're seeing, wait a minute, numbers are archetypes. They come before, they're a priori, they are, but still they're mind stuff. They're not, I mean, they're relative. They're relative to a mind. They're not pure absolute.
Yeah, this is you're very much talking now about that intersection between relative and absolute, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, I get all a bit up to the relative, but when you go into the absolute, I'm lost. I haven't a clue, which is exactly as you joke about. It's like, well, then you're exactly on track, Geoff. It's like, I just can't seem to get this absolute side of the fence down, but you're reminding me quite a lot of Rupert Spira at the moment, I can trust that all is mind and that everything begins with awareness, and all that there actually ever is mind and awareness, in the absolute sense. But sometimes cognitively, I struggle, if I'm just being honest, I kind of,
because the mind can't really understand things that go beyond itself, but your awareness has that capacity.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And your awareness can see, like George Berkeley said, numbers exist in minds. And your mind is like, well, I don't know if that's true because there's only mind. Your mind just thinks that there's only mind. But wait, where is the number? Where's the number? The numeral 3 out there. You can't find a triangle out there. A pure triangle. You can have you can put 3 stones down and you see a triangle, but there is no triangle. It's in your mind.
I know what you mean. I know. And this is kind of a really deep phase we've got in our journey with this, but also I think an important one, because when you play with these principles of geometry, it is happening in the deepest parts of mind, your finite mind, but also probably deeper layers of mind are being triggered in the process. And I know for certain when I've, meditated deeply on sacred geometry, that it's this feeling of like being taken into levels of depth that are very hard to describe, actually. But that idea of 3 stones and then seeing a triangle, the triangle isn't out there on the ground, it's in here in awareness. And so I just feel it's a very important point, this one, to make for our, for our entire project, that this very thing we're talking about is very central to how sacred geometry can actually impress information upon your mind, your awareness,
It's a singularly unique, precious subject matter because it goes right to the deepest part of universal mind. There's nothing else like it.
Nothing else like it.
And it's true. If anything is true, then mathematics is true.
Beautiful, Scott.
But
you've really helped me out there. That was a good little bonus round, Woo, that took a lot of my brain juice to get through the fine-tuning chapter. But it's the stuff I love, and it's just to make reference to the irony or the paradox or the contradiction, maybe, of you do all this brain crunching, working out like cells and atoms and this vastness of scales and complexity, and then like, the breakthrough point comes when you kind of let go of all of that and you just break through into a place where you just are with it and you're not thinking, you're not working stuff out. And it's like this seesaw, isn't it, with sacred geometry between churning your mind in this intense way and then breaking through into this blissful state of freedom that comes with it.
And when you
I
make
haven't
that
fully worked.
breakthrough, when you make
Yeah,
that breakthrough, Geoff, don't you feel that the geometry doesn't even matter? Because
yeah, I
what
do.
matters is that you made that breakthrough.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
made that
Do you know what? And even
transformation. Yeah.
in that space, there's no geometry. There's nothing. There's just bliss.
Because you've gone beyond universal mind. You've
Yeah,
gone past that final boundary,
yeah,
and now you're experiencing the
yeah.
absolute. You're experiencing truth, goodness, beauty, but there's no labels. There's not even words there.
No words, no nothing. Yeah,
No.
it's
And
an incredible experience.
that's ultimately what we want to guide people towards experiencing. But
Exactly.
along the way, we find that geometry is like the express train to get you
Yeah,
there. Um,
yeah.
uh, but
It's
when
perfect.
you get to your destination, you realize
Yeah.
the way you got there doesn't matter.
Totally. It's
Yeah,
like the idea, I think it was Alan Watts talks about, you want to get to the sacred island, and in order to get to the sacred island, you need a magic canoe, and then so you spend all your life trying to find a magic canoe so you can get to the sacred island. But then once you arrive at the island, you can burn the canoe. You don't need it.
yeah.
The canoe no longer is important or necessary because you've arrived, you're there, it's kind of like that as well. So look, I think that I feel we did justice to that chapter, and I'm glad we did because it's such a central component of the whole project of Sacred Geometry Academy. Um, I hope it was a fun journey. It probably like taxed your brain, dear viewer. But the thing is, anybody who's followed us this far downstream, if you're watching this, I know for a fact that you're like digging this vibe because nobody's going to watch this far without actually being on the raft, being on the road, or with us. So thank you. If you're here and you've watched this, you're really getting into the sort of the deep dimensions of what the most meaningful parts of this whole journey are for me and Scott.
And in the next chapter, we're going to try to address some of the most common questions that we find that arise
Yeah.
when you're contemplating this very different worldview. And so I look forward to getting into the top 10 questions next time.
Fabulous. So we'll see you in the next video. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Scott.